After hearing his janitor speak Arabic, Japanese, German, and Russian, Dominic couldn't let it go. Joseph. Always there. Always quiet. No eye contact. No complaints. Yet now, a haunting curiosity clawed at Dominic's rational mind. The CEO stopped delegating and started watching. Late at night, Dominic sat alone in his office, surrounded by screens like a conductor in a surveillance symphony. Footage rolled from elevators, lobbies, break rooms. Joseph moved like clockwork, unassuming, gliding from corner to corner with his mop as if marking invisible boundaries. But then something twisted the rhythm. The morning hum began like clockwork. Glass doors hissed open. Polished shoes clicked across marble. Keycards beeped. Laughter curled through the corridors, shallow, professional, meaningless. But no one noticed the old man in gray, wheeling his cart of cleaning supplies, gliding past with a gait too smooth for his years. His name tag said Joseph. No one read it. They never did. Inside Blackwood Dynamics, a company that ran on steel nerves, sleepless ambition, and stock tickers, people didn't greet janitors. They dodged them like furniture. They didn't say hello. They said, move. Joseph always moved. At the top floor, behind biometric scanners and bulletproof glass, sat a man whose name was whispered more than spoken. Dominic Blackwood. Cold. Calculated. The kind of man who shook your hand with eyes that measured your soul. The kind who smiled like it was a glitch in the system. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His silence was a blade sharper than any memo. Dominic ran the empire with a single obsession: control. He controlled markets. Controlled narratives. Controlled every movement within the 86 floors of his tower. But that night, something slipped. It was 10:47 p.m. Dominic had returned to fetch a folder he left in the war room. He didn't like others touching his notes. As he walked past the 34th floor lounge, he paused. Someone was speaking Arabic. Flawless. Precise. Dominic froze. There were no Middle Eastern clients on the schedule. No team briefings in Arabic. He traced the voice. And there, under low lights, back turned, phone pressed to his ear, stood Joseph. The janitor. His posture wasn't slouched. It was poised. His voice didn't fumble. It flowed like it belonged in a boardroom, not a broom closet. Dominic stood still, half in shadow. Joseph ended the call, picked up a spray bottle, and began cleaning the vending machine glass like nothing happened. No accent. No hesitation. No mistake. Dominic didn't say a word. He returned to his office. But he didn't read the folder. He sat, staring. Not at the screen, not at the skyline, but at a question that refused to make sense. Why is my janitor speaking Arabic better than my translators? He chalked it up to coincidence. Until the next morning, 10:12 a.m. The boardroom. A delegation from Tokyo had arrived early. While the senior execs scrambled to find a Japanese-speaking liaison, someone offered tea. It was Joseph. No one asked him to speak. But he did. Fluent. Polite. Native level. He bowed gently. The Japanese delegate bowed back. And smiled. Dominic's jaw locked. The same day, at 2:40 p.m., he overheard Joseph saying "Guten Tag" to a German auditor who got lost in the parking garage. Joseph then redirected the man, in perfect German. By 4:15 p.m., it was Russian. A visiting cybersecurity consultant from Moscow was mumbling in frustration at the front desk. Joseph emerged from the elevator. 5 words in Russian. The man's entire expression changed. He followed Joseph like a student follows a professor. Dominic didn't move from the mezzanine stairwell. He gripped the railing. By 5:30 p.m., the whisper had reached him. "Hey, you know the janitor speaks like all these languages?" "Yeah. I think I heard him on the phone in Hebrew last week." Dominic had built a billion-dollar company by predicting chaos, planning 10 steps ahead, cutting through deception with precision. But now, he didn't know who was mopping his floors. That evening, he didn't go home. He stood by the glass wall of his office, arms folded behind his back, eyes on the city, yet staring through it. The building buzzed beneath him. But his mind was on one man. Not the CFO. Not the head of strategy. Not the ex-MI6 chief of risk who reported directly to him. It was the janitor, Joseph. A man with no HR file photo. A man whose resume was handwritten. A man who passed security checks with references no one ever verified. Dominic replayed the voices in his mind. Arabic, Japanese, German, Russian. For confirmed. Others? Unknown. The hallway cameras. The background checks. None of it made sense. One sentence echoed in his mind, over and over like a cold, whispered threat. Why is my janitor speaking 7 languages? Under the sterile fluorescence of the corporate tower, Dominic Blackwood's empire pulsed like a well-oiled machine. Schedules precise. Emails answered to the second. The floors, glass, and egos spotless. But something was scratching beneath the polish. After hearing his janitor speak Arabic, Japanese, German, and Russian, Dominic couldn't let it go. Joseph. Always there. Always quiet. No eye contact. No complaints. Yet now, a haunting curiosity clawed at Dominic's rational mind. The CEO stopped delegating and started watching. Late at night, Dominic sat alone in his office, surrounded by screens like a conductor in a surveillance symphony. Footage rolled from elevators, lobbies, break rooms. Joseph moved like clockwork, unassuming, gliding from corner to corner with his mop as if marking invisible boundaries. But then something twisted the rhythm. Joseph, seen from overhead footage, paused in the north hallway at 2:17 a.m., mop in hand, and muttered something. There was no one around. Dominic leaned in. He replayed the clip. Enhanced the audio. It was Latin. A dead language. Spoken with ease. Fluid. Not theatrical like some historian. Casual. Like reciting a grocery list. And that was the problem. Nobody speaks Latin like that. The next morning, Dominic bypassed protocol. HR was summoned with urgency usually reserved for lawsuits. Pull his file, Dominic ordered. All of it. But Joseph's file was thinner than a coffee receipt. Hired 3 years ago through a contractor. No LinkedIn. No resume. No emergency contact. No social media. No payroll issues. Not even a birthday on record. Just a physical address that traced back to a demolished duplex in Newark. Joseph didn't just slip through the cracks. He lived in them. Later that week, Dominic stood at the edge of the mezzanine, gripping the metal rail, watching Joseph polish a floor that was already shining. The mop made a clean arc, and under his breath, there it was again. More Latin. Crisp and deliberate. Dominic didn't even blink. He scribbled the phrase down on his palm. Hours later, he was sitting across from Professor Elijah Marrow, an old relic of Georgetown's cryptography department. The man hadn't aged gracefully. His office smelled like mothballs and pipe smoke, but his mind was still as sharp as obsidian. Dominic pushed the note forward. The professor didn't read it once. He read it 5 times. Then looked up, eyes hollowing. This isn't church Latin, he said quietly. This is patterned. Repetitive. It's a cipher. Dominic didn't move. Elijah opened a drawer and pulled out a battered leather-bound book. Pages yellowed, dog-eared, ink bleeding into parchment. Cold War transmissions. East Berlin. Same structure. This one's incomplete but unmistakable. Your janitor, he paused, tapping the ink-stained page, is sending messages. The office fell into silence thick enough to hold its breath. Dominic's mind spiraled. A janitor who knew 9 languages. Who didn't exist online. Who muttered Cold War ciphers as casually as breathing. Joseph wasn't a ghost. He was a signal. And someone, somewhere, was listening. He called it a recognition ceremony. Just the CEO and the janitor. No audience, no cameras, no speeches. Just Dominic Blackwood, the sharpest mind in corporate finance, and the man with a mop. Joseph walked in wearing the same uniform he'd worn for 10 years. Nothing new, nothing polished. Just muted steps and eyes that didn't blink too long. He sat across from Dominic like a guest who already knew what was on the menu. You've been here a while, Dominic began, his voice smooth, but watching every tick, every blink. And you speak a surprising number of languages. Joseph tilted his head, Not confused, just choosing the shape of his answer. A man collects what he's lost, he said. Not learns. Not gains. Collects. Like grief. Like debt. Dominic didn't reply. He just nodded slowly, already cueing HR to run deeper clearance checks. And they did. What they found wasn't a red flag. It was a siren. Joseph's personnel file, flagged in a foreign embassy's archive. The same embassy that hadn't existed when Joseph was supposedly born. The date of birth? Off by decades. The address? Linked to a demolished building that once held war tribunal hearings. Every detail whispered something unfinished. So Dominic took a step further. He planted a listening chip. Small, waterproof. Tucked into the corner of Joseph's mop bucket. Later that night, when the office turned ghostly and even the vending machines went quiet, Joseph began to speak. Not in English. In French. Measured. La cible est instable. Les preuves sont incomplètes. Translation? The target is unstable. Evidence incomplete. Dominic was in his apartment, earpiece in, glass of bourbon untouched. He froze. Target. It took him a moment to realize the target wasn't someone Joseph was chasing. It was him. Dominic Blackwood. Founder. Powerhouse. Being watched. For what? Who was Joseph really? A janitor? A ghost? Maybe. But definitely not here for the floors. And here's the real twist. What evidence was incomplete? What hadn't Joseph found yet? And most importantly, who else was listening? We're far from done. If you were Dominic, what would you do next? Keep pretending? Or confront a man who might not even exist on paper? Drop your theories in the comments. Was Joseph always there to clean, or to cleanse? We're only halfway in. Stick around. This story doesn't slow down, it sharpens. He wasn't scribbling notes. He was building a time bomb. 50 minutes into the unraveling, Joseph began tearing sheets from old maintenance logs, those greasy pages nobody ever read. In the dim light of the boiler room, he dipped a salvaged fountain pen into black ink and scribbled symbols in Arabic, Korean, and Swahili. The words bled into the paper like secrets refusing to stay buried. But someone was watching. Her name was Maya. Just an intern. First-year grad student with oversized glasses and a ridiculous obsession with cryptography. To the office, she was just another forgettable face in HR. But she noticed things, especially the janitor with multilingual scribbles tucked into his coveralls. So she started collecting them. At first, it was innocent curiosity. Then it became compulsion. One note led to another. And then they started connecting. Coordinates. Specific office floors. She cracked the pattern at 52 minutes in. It wasn't random. It was a countdown. The codes revealed hidden exchanges happening across the building. Joseph wasn't cleaning rooms. He was mapping movements, predicting meetings before they happened. It was like watching a chessboard where one player was always 3 steps ahead. But here's where it gets darker. Back at his penthouse office, Dominic Blackwood, kingmaker, narcissist, was sinking deeper into paranoia. The janitor's mop had hidden microphones. His closet, a dead drop. And now, cryptic surveillance riddles appearing across the company. Dominic didn't trust anyone. Not even the walls. So he did what men like him do when the world slips out of their grip. He paid for secrets. Enter Marcus Vaughn. Ex-journalist turned private bloodhound. 10 grand for a name. Another 5 for a file. What he found wasn't a resume, it was a ghost story. 30 years ago, before Black Core Solutions was even a logo, there was a man who co-founded the project alongside Dominic. A linguist. A codebreaker. A silent genius who vanished after a classified incident in the Balkans. No funeral. No farewell. Just a missing passport and a sealed federal report. The name on the article? Joseph M. Adeyemi. Maya stared at the digital scan. Her breath caught. Joseph wasn't just decoding the present. He built the past. And now, at 1 hour, 8 minutes, Dominic held the newspaper clipping in his shaking hands. His name was second on the patent, not first. His empire, born in blood and betrayal. The last note, folded neatly in a bucket liner, read, "Ownership is a language too." You just stopped speaking it. The screen cuts to black. One phrase lingers in silence. This company wasn't built by Dominic Blackwood. Let that sink in. If you followed this far, hit that comment section. What would you do if the man sweeping your floor once built your kingdom? Would you thank him? Or run? The next act? It only gets stranger. They say silence is the sound that truth wears when it walks into a room. And for Joseph Caldor, it wasn't just about walking in, it was about reclaiming the floorboards. Our story picks up with tension already thick in the air, like the kind of pressure you feel before a storm tears the roof off everything you thought was solid. The intern, curious, bright, foolish, had been caught. His fingers were still warm from touching the code, eyes wide, mouth full of excuses that never made it past his lips. Joseph just stared at him. Silent. No anger. No punishment. Just a quiet nod, as if to say, I've done the same in a darker room with louder consequences. The boy ran, but whispers stayed. In the break room, over vending machine coffee. In stairwells. In messages too quickly deleted. Why is the CEO obsessed with a janitor? Did you see them talking? He's not normal. One even claimed they saw Joseph inside the server room, the one that needed 2 badges and a fingerprint to open. Of course, nobody believed it. Not yet. Dominic was unraveling, or rather, being unraveled by something sharper than time. One night, when the security cameras looped and the halls were asleep, he broke into the legal archives, the deep ones. The ones even HR didn't know existed. Inside a dusty metal drawer, beneath redacted files and contracts sealed with government insignias, he found the document. Incorporation. Founders. Dominic Blackwood. ISF Caldor. And just like that, the shape of everything he'd built began to shift. Joseph, or rather, ISF, wasn't a janitor. He was the mind. The soul. The signature beneath the first deal. The very pulse of the company. And somewhere in the shadows of a scandal, he'd vanished, erased, buried under headlines and hush money. Cut to flashes, moments caught like static in a dying television. Joseph, bearded and thinner, in a war room, arguing with a senator over surveillance ethics. A briefcase exchange outside an embassy gate. A press conference cut short by an accusation no one understood. And then, back in the office, Dominic stares at the document. His hands tremble, not from guilt, but from knowing the game had been rigged. And he wasn't the one doing the rigging. And then the doorknob turned. No knock. No warning. Joseph stepped inside the office he once designed, where the windows were angled to catch morning light across a table he personally commissioned. He didn't ask to sit. He didn't offer pleasantries. He didn't look angry. Just tired. I figured you'd find it eventually, he said. Dominic stood, the paper still in his grip. Joseph tilted his head. So, are you ready to talk about the truth now? Cut to black. They say power never changes hands without a whisper before the storm. And at precisely 1:30 a.m., in a company known for noise, the silence inside Blackcore Solutions was deafening. Dominic Blackwood stood rigid by his floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at nothing. Behind him, Joseph Caldor shut the door without ceremony. No guards. No lawyers. No theatrics. Just 2 men, one bloated with control, the other drenched in truth. Dominic turned. You've got 5 minutes. Joseph didn't sit. He didn't blink. Just one line, low and deliberate. The UN flagged your development projects. I volunteered for this assignment. Dominic's lips curled, almost amused. You're not a janitor. You're a plant. Joseph adjusted his cuff, revealing a scar shaped like the old NATO crest. I embedded myself because the paper trail was thin. But the money trail? That screamed. The silence became an accomplice to tension. No raised voices. No dramatics. Just confession by razor. Joseph walked to the edge of Dominic's desk, pulled a small, worn notebook from his coat. Inside, scribbled translations, symbols, obscure scripts, each a breadcrumb. These languages weren't for decoration. They were dead man switches. Contingencies. Dominic tried smiling. That CO smile, the kind you practice in mirrors and boardrooms. What do you want? Money. Joseph chuckled. Not the amused kind. The kind that's tired of the game. You're offering bribes to the man who drafted your original bylaws. I wrote the skeleton you hid under. You just dressed it in fake skin. Dominic's fingers twitched. He reached toward his phone. Joseph placed a small thumb-sized device on the desk. Try it. But know this, every language I spoke in that building wasn't for the staff. It was for watchers, analysts, partners, people who owed me. And then, he turned his back to Dominic. Walked with the weight of memory and purpose toward the far wall. There, a panel. Smooth, unmarked, invisible to the untrained eye. He raised his hand. A green scan. A hiss of decompression. The wall split. Behind it, stairs descending. Dominic followed, each step echoing through cement bones. Downward. Past wires that hadn't seen light in a decade. Into the sublevels where black core buried ghosts. Joseph stopped at a reinforced vault. He pressed his palm and a retinal scan triggered. The door groaned, then yielded. Inside, no gold. No cash. Just paper, drives, and silence thick with evidence. He pulled open a drawer. These, he said calmly, are the original server logs. Before your edits. Before the shell companies. Before you rewrote history. Dominic's face lost its tension. Not fear. Not anger. But something more dangerous, calculation. Joseph stepped closer. I've got copies on 6 continents. This box? Just the heartbeat. But the veins stretch worldwide. He placed a flash drive on the table. You were the facade, Dominic. The front. But the foundation always belonged to me. Dominic didn't speak. He couldn't. Because this wasn't just blackmail. It was resurrection. It was control rewinding itself. As Joseph turned to leave, his final words rang low. The next move's yours. But so is the spotlight. And as the vault door sealed behind him, the camera above blinked red, streaming, live. They say truth has no schedule. It doesn't knock. It doesn't warn. It bursts in, uninvited, especially in buildings made of glass and steel, where secrets hide behind polished desks and ergonomic chairs. Words spread like smoke through vents, no emails, no memos, just whispers that clung to coffee mugs and lingered between shared glances in elevators. Joseph was the founder. Not some janitor. Not a ghost on payroll. The founder. By mid-morning, the air was heavier than usual. Security guards weren't at their posts. They stood in corners, arms folded, eyes darting. The break room was dead silent. No one touched the catered fruit tray. The receptionist stopped pretending to answer calls. Dominic Blackwood, CO, Emperor of Black Core Solutions, decided to fight the fire with fuel. A company-wide meeting was announced. Mandatory. The message was urgent, short, cold, basement auditorium. 11:30, attendance required. He stepped onto the stage flanked by 2 board members and a tired PR manager whose palms wouldn't stop twitching. Behind him, the giant company logo. In front of him, 230 chairs filled with uneasy people and 1 empty front row. Dominic cleared his throat. There's been the confusion, he began. Lies, planted by a disgruntled former employee. Let me be clear, Joseph was never. The double doors at the back slammed open. 2 plainclothes officers stepped in. Behind them, black-jacketed Interpol agents. Silent, unsmiling, carrying warrants in clear envelopes like they were holding death certificates. Guess. Phones came out. Dominic froze, eyes darting between his counsel and the growing cluster of federal agents. He leaned to whisper something to his lawyer. But the lawyer didn't move. He stepped away. And joined Interpol. Upstairs, in a supply closet dressed up as a janitor's den, Joseph watched. A cracked monitor blinked in grayscale, spliced between 5 different camera angles. He saw the agents, the stunned employees, the flicker of sweat gathering on Dominic's temple. He didn't blink. He didn't smirk. He just stood. Below, Dominic's voice cracked. There's been a mistake. This is a hostile. He didn't finish. 2 officers flanked him, one calmly reading his rights as the other clicked cuffs tight enough to sting. The boardroom fell into a vacuum. No claps. No murmurs. Just chairs scraping back as people stood instinctively, unsure if they were witnessing a firing or the collapse of a regime. Joseph pressed a key on the old laptop beside the monitor. One last file queued up. An internal message sent to every employee. Your company has always belonged to truth. You've only forgotten whose name it was built on. No sign-off. No branding. Just a digital whisper. He opened the closet door, stepped into the hallway where eyes turned but mouths stayed shut. No one knew what to say. Most didn't even recognize him up close. He walked to the front desk, the same one he passed every morning, mop in hand. The same desk that ignored his greetings. He placed his ID tag down gently. The badge read, Facilities Custodian, Joseph K. He looked at the receptionist. This time, she didn't look away. You can call me Caldor now. Then he turned and walked away, but not far, because founders don't run. They return. They called it a hostile takeover, but not in the way Wall Street movies usually play it. There were no stock price crashes, no suited boardroom assassinations, no champagne toasts, just silence. And Joseph, 2 hours ago, he was mopping floors. Now, the building had been swept in a far more permanent way. When the boardroom erupted with chaos, and Dominic Blackwood was escorted through the glass lobby in cuffs, no shouting, no handcuffs jingling, just quiet footsteps and judgmental eyes, Joseph didn't gloat. He didn't even blink. Surveillance footage later showed him calmly removing a janitor's keyring from his belt. He hung it on the nail behind the boiler room door, like someone clocking out of a life he never applied for. Security tried offering him Dominic's office. The assistant stammered, "They want you to lead. The CEO's seat is yours." Joseph glanced at the polished nameplate, still stained with ambition. He whispered something barely audible to the microphone he always wore but never used. Then turned away. Create a board. 3 people. Rotate every year. No more gods here. He walked through the building unnoticed except for one figure standing by the exit, the intern. The same kid who had pieced together 3 dead languages on coffee-stained napkins. Who saw messages where others saw madness. Joseph paused. No handshake. No speech. Just a small box, sealed with wax. He handed it over like one would pass down a family heirloom. The intern blinked. "What is this?" Joseph's answer was simple, insurance. Moments later, a black car pulled up without a sound. No logo. No license plate. Joseph stepped in without turning back. Cut to the airport. No security lines. No luggage. He didn't need either. He walked straight to gate 47, ticket already scanned by a face he once trained in Istanbul. No boarding announcement. No one else in sight. From the tarmac, you could see the plane's tail. All black. Unbranded. That plane didn't go to Paris. Or London. Or Berlin. It went somewhere names don't exist, where people like Joseph go to watch the world quietly correct itself. Back in the city, the intern sat at a cafe with the box open. Inside, the cipher key. Not a digital file. Not a USB stick. A real book, handbound. A whisper from the Cold War. Inside the cover, one note, written in blocky Cyrillic letters and translated below. In case you ever need to speak up. Then the screen fades to black. And the final words echo, not shouted, not hyped, just spoken with the weight of a man who never wanted to be seen. Sometimes, the janitor is just cleaning up messes. Other times, he's cleaning up history. If that made your skin shift and your mind spin, you already know, this wasn't just another office drama. This was the kind of story they'll never teach in business school. So if you want more stories that don't just pass the time, but twist it, hit that like button, slam subscribe, and share it with the one friend who always suspects the quiet ones. Because trust me, they're the ones who write the ending.